What does it look like to be an Iranian refugee in an Oklahoma middle school? Welcome back to another book review brought to you by our friends at Peniel Press, where good theology is good discipleship. Today I'm looking at Everything Sad is Untrue by Nayeri. This was a fascinating book. It's not in my usual genre. It's an imaginative memoir. He's writing as an adult, but he's imagining himself as a middle school student telling his entire class the story of his family. And I hadn't heard of this book, but I was at the 2024 Doxology Conference in Holland, Michigan, and one of the guest speakers was Nayeri, and he was fascinating and interesting and compelling, and I do think there's something powerful about a well-written story for youth and middle grade. I think that these stories can really open up the imagination in beautiful and in powerful ways. So I eventually bought the book and started reading it, and it is beautiful. It starts and Consistory, which I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, which is part of the joke in the book, but Daniel is telling his class the story of his family, and in doing so the timeline is disjointed. He has only a few memories of one grandfather, one of another, and then he tells other stories, some of which are pretty painful, and he wrestles with the fact that as an immigrant, his memory, his connection to his place and his past and his people has been ruptured and fragmented because he was ripped out of that environment. The question of who he is and where he comes from and how he makes sense of himself and his identity in this world is really a difficult question for him. And because the story kind of goes all over the place, the details fall in bits and pieces as you get towards the end. So what actually happened? Why did they leave Iran? As he tells the story of this family that in this beautiful place with beautiful food, and they had a position of influence. They were respected within their community, and you can tell from the beginning that it has all fallen apart, and you don't know why most of the way through. And as you get further, you realize that they're going to church here in Oklahoma, and that there was a moment of faith and of conversion that most of the way through the book you finally get that moment. And by that point, you can feel what they're losing, what the cost is to know and to follow Jesus for this family. And part of the beauty of the story is, had you led with that, had you led from an adult perspective, it would seem much more melodramatic. It would seem very different than when a child is describing everything they love and everything they had and everything that seemed home and safe and normal for them in their life. When you got to that moment where his mother became convinced that Christianity was true, and in a country where it was illegal and it was a capital offense, and the whole everything that they lost, you get a sense of that in a deep and powerful way, and to consider it all worth losing because it's true. There's a powerful section. I keep saying powerful, but I mean, read the book. There's a section where he describes the strength of his mother and what she has to endure and to overcome, and that she's a smart woman, she's a strong woman, and she would not have done this if she did not believe it was true. She would not have endured having to leave her family, endured a pretty terrible second marriage with a violent husband. She would not have done all this for her children if she did not believe that Christianity was true. And there's a lot of funny stuff in there because kids can tell it in a different way. The differences between cultures, the differences of food, the differences of how you go to the bathroom, what a toilet's like. There's a lot of toilet talk in the book. The differences in all of that are told in a way that feels very honest and raw from a young child. And it exposes both the beauty of the differences in a place like Iran and the culture and what it has to offer and its, the gifts that it has, but also how when you move from one to another, the challenges that come, the things that you just don't know, and the things people assume about you because you're an immigrant who doesn't know how things work here. People assume you're uneducated. They assume that you're stupid. They assume that you're uncultured. And as he shares the culture of his homeland and the how ancient and wise it is, it transforms these encounters. And hopefully for you and for me, when we encounter people who don't know how things are done here because they're from a different culture, we can think of Daniel and think of all the gifts and the beauty from where he comes from, and yet the assumptions that were made about him. And to come from wealth to poverty as well is another piece, that because they're refugees, they had to leave everything, and they had a comfortable life in Iran to come to poverty and being considered poor trash in their community in Oklahoma. And the story, is everything sad is untrue, and it doesn't have a nice little bow at the end. It doesn't tie everything up and say, look, everything was happy and this is okay and all was great. There is a profound hope because this mother does indeed believe in this faith that she has found, and the mother is the hero of this story for him. And so there's profound hope at the end, and because he's in his 30s and he's writing this and he's more stable and all this, that in some sense some healing takes place, but that's not where the story ends. It ends with hope, not with resolution at that point, which is kind of how all of our stories are at different times. That they end, or they sit with hope, not with full resolution. And I think there's something beautiful there. And I also, as an immigrant myself and as a pastor of immigrants and refugees, this story was really moving for me, because even though I have not walked where the Nayeris have walked, there are residences for everyone who has immigrated, who has left home to go somewhere else. And particularly as a pastor of people who've had to leave either from physical persecution or from economic devastation, who've had to leave behind some things that they loved, things that were beautiful, things that were important and good, to enter into a place, and now they have to start in poverty and in struggle. The story of the Nayeris was a deep connection with what I encounter regularly in my own congregation, and yet at the same time, that strength and that hope that you see in the mother is also something I encounter very regularly in these immigrant communities. And so it helped me with my own story and my own family story, and connect with that in immigration for myself, but also it continued to heighten my compassion for my own people that God has entrusted to me and people in my own community. And so I do recommend this book if you're not into memoirs, this is a great one. But also note that it's not going to be sequential. So if that's something that really bothers you, that it's going to be out of chronological order, this might not be the book for you. But if you can get past that, or if you find that actually intriguing, this will be a fantastic book, particularly for those who have moved themselves or who want to love and care for the stranger and the immigrant in their community. This will open your eyes to see it in a different way and to see the beauty and gifts that they have to offer to us and the struggles that they face. So I highly recommend it. It is Everything Sad is Untrue by Daniel Nayeri. And there will be a link in the description if you want to buy the book. That will help out Daniel and his work, but also if you use the link that we have, it helps out some of the work that we're doing here at Peniel Press and supports the work that we do. But thank you for your time, and God bless, and see you next time.